Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. You can also check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, be that Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, a little bit of everywhere. If you could, just rate and review us, if possible, at wherever you listen to the podcast. You can also check me out at patreon.com/soniccinema. This month is going to be pretty busy. Still have a lot of stuff to talk about with regards to the Oscars. Still have a lot to discuss with regards to today's topic. And then hopefully I will be having my favorite soundtracks of 2021 up on there. That is the Patreon at patreon.com/soniccinema. Last weekend was the 2022 Renegade Film Festival, and this was my second time actually covering the festival. The previous time, it was known only as the Women in Horror Film Festival. I covered it in 2020, and it was a wonderful experience. And it was a really great experience to kind of go out on when it came to my movie watching, because shortly after that, basically everything shut down, and and watching movies at the time became a bit of a challenge for movie theaters. So that was the last theatrical experience I had before COVID shut down movie theaters, and so this is the first year the Renegade Film Festival has been back since then, and I was really looking forward to this one because of the fact that I loved the sense of community that Vanessa, the organizer and the festival director, came up with, and it was such a wonderful experience. I got to meet some filmmakers that I've come to know over the years. I got to see a lot of really interesting films, and it was just such a wonderful experience, and I was really looking forward to that. And this was the first real fully in-person festival that I've seen in a couple of years. Last year the Atlanta Film Festival had a lot of in-person, but it still have virtual component as well as a drive-in component, so it's hard to kind of include that. This was the first, and Thursday, admittedly, it was a full day. First of all, as opposed to just Thursday night, but it was a bit of a slow day as far as like getting to interact with people. First day back, I think a lot of that. I think a lot of that is something that you kind of expect early on in a film festival, and that one was kind of surprising. And part of that was because of the fact that it was during school, but nonetheless, it was really great to talk about. Before I get to talking about the festival in general, though, I wanted to share the first of 3 interviews. One of the things that I like about the Renegade Film Festival, and I think just about every film festival has this, is they have competitions for screenplays as well as features. And I know one of my interviews in 2020, Robbie Barnes, she was down for a short screenplay that she had written, and she was in that competition. This year, I got to talk to writer M.R. Fitzgerald. She was there with her short screenplay, People in the Box, and I hope you enjoy that conversation. First of all, what brings you to the Renegade Film Festival this year?
Well, this year I'm a short screenplay finalist, and it's for the script called People in the Box.
Okay. If you could describe a little bit about what the script's about.
Sure. The script is about a group of performers who are all locked together in a black box theater, and they have to perform in order to survive.
That sounds like it does sound like a really ideal concept for a short film. I really, and I can see how that would be nice, simple, like
15, 20-minute short maybe, and just you get in, you get out, and it's entertaining along the way.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Like, and I agree, especially in the process of, writing it, because actually it was based on a longer novel I wrote, but that was like a bigger, big move, or like a big period piece type of thing. It was really overly complicated. It was a lot of details. So this project, as a short, it was more of an exercise on stripping it down. Like, how much can I strip it down, and then actually stripping it down actually enhances the story and the theme more. And I was actually surprised that it shrunk down to one location. It's a black box theater, so it's black. We can't see anything except spotlights, and then like 3 to 4 characters. And then it has like a 3-act structure, like they all go through a big journey, but it's wrapped up in like 14 pages.
Okay. Yeah, I you can definitely see how that would work visually. And is currently what is it something that is it something that you're eventually going to have produced? Is it something you're interested in having well, obviously, if you wrote it as a script, you're interested in having it produced.
Oh, totally. But I get what you mean of like, I do want to direct it myself eventually, because I wrote it like 3 years ago, so I've had it in my mind. I know how the shots look, and the camera movements, and the acting and everything like that. So that's my goal, and I spoke to actors already who are interested in a DP. So now it's just the funds.
Yeah, the hardest part.
The
you
hardest
mean?
part.
Is this your first screenplay that you've written?
Yeah, actually it is. Yeah.
Okay.
I wrote it years and years ago. So it's my very first script I've ever written. So it's kind of weird to me that it's like come this far in the span of these past few years.
Is horror something that's been interesting to you over the years, or is it just something where when this idea came about, you just had the idea of, oh, this is a genre idea?
Ooh, that's a good question. I always loved horror, by the way, ever since I was a kid. I was always a big fan of it. But weirdly enough, like the longer version of People in a Box in particular, it was a drama. It wasn't a horror at all, by the way. But in the stripping down of the story, it really, and then embracing more ambiguity, actually turned it into a horror film, more than I even anticipated and planned on. Because at the time when I wrote the script, I just started film school, so like I was going out and becoming a real, or like a real quote unquote professional artist. Like art wasn't a hobby anymore. Now it was like a career I was gonna do, and I was really anxious about that. And then the script delves into the anxieties of doing it for a living, and that was, and plus like my friends along the way, and some people quit, they hang it up, and some people kind of backstab each other, and then and then how do you even navigate your way through that to hold true to like yourself as an artist versus and then what did you even get into this for? Like, did you get into it to win, quote unquote? But then I don't know, my experience writing the script, I realized like there's no winner. You just, because you have to still start over. Like, you make art and then you start over again and again and again. And the only person you have to compete against is really yourself. Are there any particular writers who have inspired you in some of the stories that you've written? Ooh, that's a great question. The OG inspiration is Twilight Zone, of course, because I feel like that show, was the pinnacle of ambiguity, short storytelling. A better, they show don't tell, but there's more dialogue, but they make it work for them versus against them, and it's a classic style. Like there's a reason why everyone still loves it today. And then also, my thing is like I love directors and writers who do it's like work that's entertaining and artistic. So I love directors like Luca Guadagnino and Denis Villeneuve, who is like they have horror elements to their work, and it's scary, and it's like even in ways that you don't even know why, and stuff like that. So that's where my work kind of has its most inspiration from.
Okay. What has been the how long have you been taking the script to film festivals and the screenwriting competitions?
Ooh, I started in 2019, so like right when I graduated from film school, like I started submitting my scripts, and so yeah, this is about 3-ish years now, I guess, and it's been I did not really anticipate the really nice feedback I've gotten from it, especially, and then Renegade Film Festival is a really, nice festival. I've heard really good things about it. So even being included like in this higher level genre film festival, like I was really like, I was tickled.
Yeah. No, and I've this is my second time covering the festival, and it's wonderful seeing the different voices that are coming into the film, and I like that it's predominantly short film dominated. And with some features, but the short films, you get a good idea of how much talent is out there making movies with their own particular point of views, with their own stories to tell in very different ways. And I think that's one of the things that's beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And even seeing how people do all of that, plus like, I don't know, all the movies are wild. Like none of them like are predictable. None of them like bore me. Like they all scare me on different levels, and they're different flavors, different ideas, different backgrounds, and especially coming out of film school, where film school we're taught like one way of filmmaking and one way of writing. But going to these festivals, I learned like there's a million ways to make movies.
Yeah.
Now. Like there's really no one way anymore, and I love that. It's really inspiring, because then you just know, like, you just do your thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like that will work for you versus against you.
So do you already have ideas in mind for the next script, or right now are you just focusing on this one, getting this made, and then you'll start thinking about the next one?
Oh boy, I'm the worst. I come up with a lot of ideas at once. So right now I have 2 short scripts that are making the festival rounds, by the way. A couple years ago, I had a script called The Boneyard, and it was a semi-finalist here. So
Okay.
And then this one, and that one's going around as well. So People in the Box and Boneyard are both being kind of shopped around. And right now I'm finishing up a serial killer feature
Okay.
script.
There's certainly nothing wrong with having multiple ideas around, because I think that's, once you, and it's fine to just focus on one thing, but I think if you're, especially if the ideas are there, you want to get those ideas in some form sooner rather than later. Otherwise they could vanish. And
Yes.
yeah.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. It's, I think to me, in my opinion of how I work anyway, like it's the better, or it's a good habit to finish your scripts, but you're right. Like if the idea is fresh, it's gonna go away and you're never gonna get it back. And then yes, you can journal it, but like you just don't get that inspiration that much for it. So now I know that about myself. So I'm still kind of like, I still have a structure of like, okay, well, I don't feel like working on the script right now, so I will work on this and get that inspiration out of the way, and then I'll come back to the script. So like, they all are going to get done eventually.
Well, good luck with this script at Renegade, and good luck with it getting made. I certainly hope to see it make the rounds in festivals and maybe even play here in the future.
Oh, thank you. I would love that. Thank you.
One of the things that I really like about Renegade is it's so much about movies and watching movies, and there's basically a short film block or feature going on every hour, or every few hours, depending on how long the blocks are. And it can be exhausting, and that's one of the things I definitely noticed about Women in Horror a couple of years ago. And it kind of I kind of hated it that time because of the fact that I wanted to see as much as possible, and I think I still ended up missing like a couple of short film blocks. But be that as it may, it's one of those things where it's what it is, you know, especially depending on how you moderate your food intake and how you go about doing that. This year, I went bright and early Thursday morning and was really looking forward to getting into the festival. And so the first two blocks this year were Gen Z blocks, which were made by short films made by filmmakers 17 and under, which was, to a certain extent, was the roughest of the bunch in terms of quality, but completely understandable because they're filmmakers who are just getting started. But there are still some really entertaining short films, which we'll talk about as we go along. And then after that was the Filmmaking 101 block, which was student films, which there were 4 in there, and it was an interesting collection. And I'm going through all of the ones that I go through. I'm going through all of the short film blocks on Patreon, so be sure to check that out. At 2:30 was the first feature of the weekend. It was Take Back the Night, which is a psychological horror thriller about a woman who is assaulted after a party, but she can't really explain what assaulted her, and so she starts to get a lot of pushback on her story. And it's a really fascinating psychological thriller. It came out last week, actually, so you can check it out now. And it's worth a watch. It was a really interesting one. It was an interesting genre entry, and it was a good start to the features this year. After that, I took in the Techno Terror block, which is the sci-fi short films. I did skip the psychological short films to get some food because I was trying to get hungry before watching. Coming back for the 6:45 feature, which was Souvenirs, which is an interesting thriller about a young girl who is looking after her grandmother's shop, which focuses on artifacts from past killers and serial killers in particular. And when she gets sent a box of artifacts from a recent murder, she is forced to deal with that in a really interesting way that goes back to her past. Overall, I thought it was good. It was a good movie, and it's gonna be one worth checking out as well. Followed that up with the Global Terror block, which was international short films, and I will go through some of the short films that really stood out. After that, I didn't actually take part of either of the nightcaps this year on Thursday and Friday. I did do the after party on Saturday, which is where all of these interviews were recorded, and that was a lot of fun. And I think part of it is because of the fact I've been closing at work so much recently that I just felt like I needed to get as much sleep as possible, especially since these were all very long days for me. First thing is we start off with a short experimental and art house film block on Friday. Admittedly, I missed this one. Or, no, I didn't see all of it, but I did see the last two, Moochie and Grummy. And those were pretty good. But I basically stood out in the lobby, talked to some more people. There were more people there. And that was good. Next up was the feature film The Winter Hunger from Spain. And it's a really interesting movie where it's essentially a zombie movie. It's very much in the Romero formula of the Night of the Living Dead, as well as the Danny Boyle Day of the Dead, or 28 Days Later. I think it has 2/3 of a pretty good movie before it kind of falls off a cliff in the third act. It's definitely something that I thought had absolutely beautiful cinematography, but the part of the reason that it didn't really work for me at the very end is because of the fact that it's so dark and it's not well lit and it's barely lit at all. You can barely comprehend what's going on. So I had some issues with that one at the end, and it sucked because of the fact that I thought it started off very well. Next up was the Catharsis Block, which focuses on trauma through horror. And actually, my last two interviews of this podcast are going to be from this block. And this was a very heavy block. There were a lot of tremendous films in this one, and I had a chance to talk with a couple of the filmmakers from the Cathartic Block, and one of them was writer-director Syd Vanroosendaal, and they were the creator of Skin and Bones, and I hope you enjoyed our discussion.
Okay, well, first of all, who am I saying you're with?
I'm Syd Vanroosendaal, the writer and director of Skin and Bones.
And your short played during the Catharsis Block at the Renegade Film Festival this year, and it was like all of those shorts in that block. It was very heavy to watch, but it was really impactful to watch too. So I appreciate you. Is this the first festival that it's been at?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first festival it's been accepted to, and the first festival we've gone to in person, so it's a very exciting experience.
Where did the inspiration for this come from?
I personally have recovered from an eating disorder myself. I've been in recovery since, it's like 10 years now which is kind of amazing. But yeah, I've been in recovery for about 10 years, and I've seen a lot of films about eating disorders, and they always end with this: they get treatment, or she gets treatment, I guess I should say specifically. It's always a woman who gets treatment and gets better. Whereas with addiction, eating disorders, mental illness, it just takes progress and work like every day, all the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that I think especially when you're dealing with issues like that, it is important to show the setbacks and not try to paint it with a rosy tint at the end, where it's like, oh yeah, and then they got better. It's like, because it's not always that simple, and it's also something where that is a process. And I think the process is, as somebody who myself, I've dealt with stress, anxiety, all of that for most of my life, and I know in really attacking those issues, it has been a process. There have been some times where it's easier than others. There are some times where I felt like, oh, I'm getting better, and then I have something happen where I realize that's not the case at all. What were some of the challenges you had when it came to putting this? Were there any challenges that you had when it came to writing this and then eventually making it into a feature film?
Yeah, so I've been writing it since 2018, 2019, about. Got ready to film it around when the pandemic started. Postponed it for that reason. And the script just kept changing and changing because I had so much time to keep writing it. I think I went over like 170 drafts and stopped counting around then. But yeah, it's just really the biggest issue, or the biggest thing I ran into while writing it, I think the blessing in disguise was me getting COVID right before us shooting, because I was able to look at the script and be like, what do we really need here? Like, what do I absolutely need to tell this story? And tear apart what wasn't needed and keep what was needed in. So there was this bare bones script more so coming in. It was easier to shoot with.
I think one of the things that is so interesting about this is that, and I think one of the things that is so honest about this is that you show the support system that the main character has, but you also see people who are not as supportive, and that struggle between those two, and even with the best support system, that process, you can easily backslide into some of the same old habits that you had. What were some of the challenges that you had in what were some of the challenges you had in visualizing this and trying to make it somewhat cinematic?
Yeah, it was a lot of. I honestly was quite obsessed with The Fly while I was making this. I'm actually wearing the shirt right now as we speak. But yeah, I just kept watching David Cronenberg's The Fly over and over again. He's my favorite director of all time. And really trying to visualize how he break down exactly how he like tore apart piece by piece Brundlefly becoming Brundlefly, Seth Brundle becoming Brundlefly.
Yeah.
There are images online of like the makeup artist going like sketch by sketch, and I went through with my makeup artist being like, hey, we gotta really piece this out, like, make sure this looks right, like throughout the time period of the film. So like keeping aware of like visual effects throughout every scene, as well as working with my cinematographer very closely as to what visual style I wanted. We shot with a 4:3 aspect ratio to kind of get off that horror to video vibe, because that's what we were going for. So just every step of the way being in full communication with everyone, being completely honest as to exactly what I wanted, what I was going for, making as many vision boards and binders until I was sick. Like,
What were some of the challenges in making this film during the pandemic?
There were quite a few. Not only did I get COVID, but because of me getting COVID, we lost our location, which was this beautiful mansion in this very rich part of Utah. But that didn't end up working out because the location didn't work for the new time that we would have to need. So our location dropped out, and then a producer dropped out, and then an actor dropped out, and slowly we were just losing more and more crew members. And there was a point in time, like I went to bed, and I was sick with COVID, mind you, at the time, so I had taken some NyQuil, and I was like lying in bed, and my cinematographer and my producer, who was still on the film, I had two producers, they texted me and they're like, hey, we don't know if this is gonna happen, like, this is like kind of falling apart really quick. We don't know if this is really gonna work. I went to bed, I was like on cough medicine, I wasn't about to like deal with any of that. I was like, cool, I'm going to bed. I woke up the next morning, I texted everyone I had like gone to film school with that I enjoyed working with. I was like, hey, what are you doing like in a couple weeks? Like, are you free this day? Like, what's your availability like? And we got a crew that I ended up really liking. It kind of reinforced like my love of the people I know in Salt Lake that I love working with. And it ended up working out like just fine. We got a new location that worked even better for the characters' stories, because the mansion, quite frankly, didn't make sense with how much the dad was like
Yeah.
what job he had. It was like
Yeah.
a suburban feel. So we ended up finding like a more suburban looking home that fit everything better. Things just kind of fell into place oddly how that works.
Did you have, I mean, having gone through what you've gone through in your life, was it taxing for you emotionally to be able to tell this story on screen?
I didn't think it would be at all in the beginning. At first, like, I thought the writing was the catharsis part for me. It wasn't until like I got home the first day after being on set that I was just like, I just told my childhood story. Like, oh my goodness, I'm feeling a lot. And I just allowed myself to really like have that space to feel that, like honored those emotions. Just like, it's okay that I'm feeling this right now, but I've got to be back on set tomorrow morning, like sharp and ready. And we, you know, and there was a lot of conversations as well with the lead actor who was playing, you know, asking someone to pretend to purge. Like, it was very important to me that they did not have any history with bulimia whatsoever. So there were a lot of frank conversations about, you know, what is your history with eating disorders like? Like, let's talk about that in depth a little bit more, and really getting to know the crew members as well. Teaching people in the crew that intuitive eating is okay. Like, you don't have to diet to lose weight. Like, it's all about just being mindful about what you're eating and a little bit of everything in moderation.
Yeah. Where did, I don't necessarily want to spoil the ending, but where did the idea for that ending come from? Was it the idea of wanting to illustrate this through the idea of body horror, or was it just something because of the fact that you had this genre in mind that's kind of just where it went to?
I would say it's a bit of both. You know, the biggest reason I would say that the end came about was because I felt that the only way the main character would truly be able to love themselves was if they consumed themselves.
Yeah.
Sorry to spoil it, but
Yeah, it's hard to talk about without doing it.
But
So.
I felt that was an odd form of self-hatred and self-love, like kind of the ultimate, like they've relapsed and gotten as bad as they can, but also in their twisted delusional mind, like could be a form of,
Yeah.
no, I actually like truly learned how to love myself. So it was a bit of trying to get into that character's headspace of being that sick, and then also viewing it from the audience and the family member's perspective of, oh my god, that character is so delusional.
Yeah. So what is next for you with both this film and any other films that you have in mind?
So Skin and Bones is actually based on a feature that I wrote. It's not been made yet, but it's just been there in the background since I've made this, essentially. So continuing to like tweak that and work on that, as well as a couple other shorts that I've got going on in the mix.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are you going to continue to try to submit this to other festivals?
Yeah, we're waiting to hear back from like 10 festivals right now. Like this is the first one we got picked up from, so.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think you and I sort of talked about it a little bit earlier. It's like the idea that, you know, that was this festival, and I love what was said about Vanessa earlier, where it's like this festival was about inclusion, and I really noticed that when it was here a couple of years ago, and even more so this year. And I think this type of story makes all the sense in the world to be not only put in with the block that it was put in, but with the rest of the films in this festival in general, because this is about this festival really does thrive on telling uncomfortable stories through genre, but in ways that make us think and also connect us to the individuals on screen.
Yeah, no, I loved what, I think the director of Maya, if I'm not mistaken, I loved what they said about Vanessa and this really being an inclusive horror film festival, because I submitted to this film festival when it was still the Women in Horror Film Festival, and as a non-binary person myself, and then most of my cast and crew like being non-binary as well, we often do get lumped in with women, like those special women categories, because there's not really like a special non-binary person festival that I've heard of quite yet. So I still submitted to this because I was like, cool, we were all still assigned female at birth, like whatever, but then they changed the name to Renegade like after I had submitted, so I was like, cool, amazing, like that's even better.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I actually said, and I actually said in my curtain raiser piece about the festival before the festival, where it's like, I loved it when it was Women in Horror, but it makes so much more sense that it's Renegade because, not only because of the inclusive nature of it, but it just ultimately captures the spirit of what this festival is more, because it, regardless of gender, regardless of life experience, these are all about film. These are all films that are doing something just slightly out of step from the norm, and I think that's quite exciting.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good luck with this film moving forward.
Thank you.
Hopefully, now that that first moment is at that first moment, hopefully it'll have more moments, and good luck with what you have coming up.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you. This is awesome.
Next up was the world premiere of Maya, which this is I want to say it's the second film, but it's actually the first film from a filmmaker who's been on the podcast before, K11. And she did Black Lake at the 2020 Women in Horror Film Festival. And you know my history with that, no doubt. I loved that movie so much, and it was basically the best film I saw in 2020. And Maya it's funny, part of the reason that it got shelved for a little bit was primarily for budgetary reasons, but also she felt the need to go to Black Lake first, and you'll be able to read about some of that history in an interview that I did with her at the after party that is going to be running on in their own league, as well as a just an appreciation of her as a filmmaker in general. Maya went on to win the Best Feature Film Award at Renegade this year, and she was very emotional when it came to talking about this movie. And the Q&A was fantastic, and it really gave me a new appreciation. I'd actually seen Maya before the festival. I'd been able to get a screener from her, as well as a screener for Black Lake, so I could watch it again. And her work really strikes me as something very unique, and I'm really a huge fan of it. And so check out Maya if it's playing at a film festival near you. Check out Black Lake when it becomes available. I know it's on Amazon UK right now, but hopefully it will be out other places by the end of the year. And that was what I was really looking forward to. And one of the things that I've said about Kay's work is that it really, for me, her work right now feels like an event. Like, I really cannot wait to see what she comes up with next and how she approaches things next. I really do love her work, and I'm grateful to be able to have gotten to know her because of the film festival that Vanessa's put together. After that was a supernatural short film block, Things That Go Bump in the Night, which featured a few really strong short films, including Cottonmouth, which starred Heather Langenkamp, who's one of the jurors on the festival this year. And I actually got a chance to talk to her after on Friday night, and I didn't get a chance to talk to her after Women in Horror, but she actually remembered seeing me around, and we got to talking a little bit. It was really nice. It was just very conversational. It wasn't something where I wanted to do an official interview with her. It was just something I wanted to get the opportunity to talk to her, and it was good to be able to do that. I actually I actually didn't see the last one, Let's Make It a Blockbuster Night, of horror shorts. I will say I did catch up with one after the festival, The Pay, and that is one that was definitely a really interesting one. I wrote a review about it that is available for everybody, not just patrons, but it is at Patreon. And then that was basically my night after I went to get something to eat during that block, because I was just I was honestly too hungry and I needed something to eat. Saturday, unfortunately, I had to work during the day, but it is what it is. So I missed the regional short films, which was really unfortunate, because there was one that a friend of mine that I met and talked to at Women in Horror, Aaron Day, was in, called Kid Free Weekend. That had its world premiere last week, and it should be around other festivals. Hopefully I'll be able to catch it another festival. But there was also one that I saw at the 2020 Atlanta Film Festival, and they're called Bliss is Orange, which is a really lovely film. It ended up being one of the big award winners. I also missed the feature film Wolfman's Got Nards, which is Andre Gower's documentary on the Monster Squad and the fandom around the Monster Squad. I was a bit later getting to the festival that day than I expected, so I didn't see all of the horror comedy short films, but I saw enough to really appreciate what was put together in those. It was a really interesting collection of dark comedy in there. The final screening of the festival was Freaky, which is the Vince Vaughn kind of slasher riff on Freaky Friday that came out a couple of years ago, but Vanessa wanted to have at this festival, and I didn't stay for the Q&A with Michael Kennedy, the writer, but I really enjoyed the film. I hadn't seen it yet, and it was really a lot of fun to watch it with that audience. It was terrific. After that was the awards ceremony. I've already talked about a couple of the awards winners. And then the after party, where I got to talk to some of the filmmakers in more depth, as well as just enjoying the company of a lot of just what this film festival represents. And it's one of the things I just really love about this festival. The sense of community, it very much feels like home to me, and not just because it's like 20 minutes away, but I just really enjoy this festival, and I look forward to returning. That brings us to our final interview, which was with one of the award winners. Scales is a short film that played during the Catharsis Block as well, and is directed by Robbie Barnes, whom I finally met in person at the 2020 festival. She was not there, but the film's screenwriter and producer, Nonie Shiverick, was there, and I got a chance to talk to her about the film and what she's got coming up next, and I hope you enjoy it. So I am sitting here with the screenwriter and producer on Scales, which won Best Screenplay. Congratulations.
Thank
for
you
the
so
win.
much. Yeah, thank you.
Where did the inspiration for the movie come from?
I mean, I think the main goal with the project was to inspire a more educated discussion about sexual assault, and one of the things that frustrates me is it kind of, the discussion becomes derailed a lot because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell a story that evoked that discussion, that wasn't one-sided, that made you want to discuss consent. And also, I think anytime you come forward with your own story publicly, it's this like waterfall of other people who come out and say, that happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me. At one test screening of a rough cut of Scales, some guy came up to me and he was like, I didn't even realize that my uncle had molested me until I had watched your film. And so I think it's important to just put the issue out there because it makes people want to talk about it. And so that was really, I think, my frustration with how the issue gets politicized or how it gets brushed under the rug. And a lot of people don't want to talk about the hard truths of, how it feels, how victims feel, but also the catharsis of moving on. And that was what inspired me.
Yeah. Where did the idea of Scales being shown on the person who had been violated, where did that come from?
So I wanted to evoke the sense, what a lot of survivors feel, the dehumanization or the shame or the, there was something you lost within yourself that made you, I think in the Q&A after our screening, I said it's like you lost something in yourself that made you bright and shiny, and now you're dirty and, changed somehow. And so Scales, reptilian Scales especially, it's a disfiguration and it's a dehumanization, and I think that's, I myself am a survivor, and talking to other survivors, that's the feeling that a lot of people bring up when talking about how it makes them feel was, I was dehumanized, I'm ashamed, I'm dirty, I'm broken somehow, and I wanted to create a horror element that evoked that. And we put the Scales on the lead character's face because you can't escape that. It's not on your back, it's not on your, the back of your leg. It's something that you look at every single time you look in the mirror, which means she's going to relive this experience every single time she looks in the mirror. And I think that is what a lot of people face when they've gone through that. It's you don't know what's going to trigger you. It could be a certain smell, a tone of voice, and you're just constantly reliving this. And if you are hearing politicians talk or people talk in the press and they're like trying to defend Bill Cosby, for instance, or Harvey Weinstein, and it's for victims, it's you go through that shame all over again.
Yeah. What were some of the difficulties that you had in getting the film made?
Budget, as every indie filmmaker will say, budget. We did a crowdfunding campaign, so we raised several $1,000s. That several $1,000s just gets eaten up faster than you could blink. It was relatively easy to get locations. I'd originally gone for the school location to my alma mater, and they were kind of unsure if they could accommodate us, and then this other school was like, absolutely, yes, we really want to be a part of this discussion, and anything you want. Like, they were totally on board to be a part of the project. So we lucked out with locations a great deal. We shot a lot of the scenes at my aunt's house, another section of scenes at my mom's friend's house, so we really lucked out with location, but budget was a big deal. Finding the right actress who could carry that role, because it's just so dark, and she had to go to really, uncomfortable places, and I think she nailed it. If you watch the film, she absolutely, it's just, you feel for her in every single moment, and she did an amazing job. But casting was hard because you have to find the right person. But I have to say, a lot of our issues were alleviated by, I had a fantastic crew behind me. A great DP in Paul Moore. Robbie Barnes did fantastic directing. So we just had a really awesome creative team behind us.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing that really does come through in the film is just how uncomfortable this is to watch, and it coincides with just how uncomfortable the conversation can be. And I think the ability to do that is really kind of important, because I think when it comes to discussing these issues, especially in the realm of cinema, in the realm of genre as well, I think it is, if you're not feeling discomfort with something like this, I kind of feel like it's the filmmaker kind of failed at some point.
Yeah. Well, what we really wanted to accomplish was, we wanted to toe the line of discomfort in watching, but that at the end you achieve the catharsis. The scene with her mother, there's a lot of relief that happens. So you build up the discomfort, but then that scene just pays off, and it's balm on the wounds. And we wanted, it is an uncomfortable discussion. And when I was at a festival promoting an earlier film, and I knew I was shooting scales within the next year, so someone had asked me, what's your next project? And I said, I'm doing a film about sexual assault. And I had people tell me oh, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
They reacted viscerally, I don't want to touch sexual assault. And I was like, okay, well, I have to. Yeah. I don't, now I have to make this film. The fact that you're scared to means I have to, because I'm not scared to. I know exactly how I want to touch the subject. But it is really hard because it's, emotional, and it's, and we told the story in a way that does evoke emotions. The guy, the rapist, isn't, overtly villainous. He's likable, he's charming, she knows him, she likes him, and that's what most sexual assaults are. Most sexual assaults fall into this gray area where if you were to walk into a police station, and I specifically wanted to tell a story where if this girl walked into a police station, she'd be laughed out of the room, because that is how most sexual assaults go unreported, because the victims feel oh, I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel about this, how I should report this. Am I even going to be believed? Did this really happen? I don't know. And we really wanted to go into that uncomfortable gray area that makes people want to talk about. And really, the whole issue could have been avoided with a more honest discussion of consent. Had she felt more comfortable saying no, had he felt more comfortable listening, it's if consent was a topic that people felt comfortable discussing, maybe this wouldn't have ever happened for these characters. And I think that's, a lot, it's empowering women to say no, or empowering victims to say no, and empowering, the guys in that situation to accept no.
Yeah, I do agree about the catharsis, and that is such an important part of this movie. And to a certain extent, it almost starts in. I feel like that process does sort of start when the main character starts to see the other people who've been impacted by it.
Yes, because you're not alone.
Yeah. And I love the visual representation, and it was discussed in the Q&A about the fact that for some people those scales are less, and some people those scales are more, and it basically represents that all of these different people are in different parts of that journey towards
healing or acceptance. Yeah, I think we're all, it's an issue that affects everyone differently, so it's going to manifest differently. And if we're talking about scales manifesting on our bodies, that would manifest differently for every person, and we would all be on different levels of our acceptance. And I said, it wasn't during the Q&A, but it was to one of the judges afterwards. He was asking me, about the mother character. And it was very much inspired by my own mother. So when I came forward and told her about what had happened to me, she was like a trailblazer in her field. She's this really powerful woman. And she was like, oh, I was assaulted as a child by my stepdad, and it just blew my mind. I was like, how were you, and you don't carry this baggage? You're so strong and powerful and independent, and you're like this person that I've, emulated my entire life after. I've like looked up to my mother my entire life, and you got over this thing that happened to you as a kid that must have just shaped you so like viscerally at the core. And I really wanted to show the mother at the end. She has, spoiler alert, she has scars and not scales.
Yeah.
So she has healed, and I wanted to show that that is the end of the journey, that is the catharsis, that you can work through these issues, and you at the end can be like, you are more than what happened to you. Your strength is bigger than whatever was taken from you. And I wanted to show, like, no matter how hard it is, no matter how debilitating it seems, you will at some point look in the mirror and see someone bigger than what happened to them or what was taken from them.
Yeah. So what do you have coming up next?
Coming up next, my first project is going to be my directorial debut. I'm so excited about it. And that's big thank you to Robbie, actually, because we worked together after Scales. We worked together on a string of projects during the pandemic because it was like creatively we just needed to like, and watching her, she's a fabulous director, and it's inspiring to watch her, and people have told me throughout my entire career, why don't you direct? Because I write very much with a vision, and I produce my writing, and then I find directors who are willing to work with me to see that vision made. And I always said, oh, it wasn't for me. And I had this sort of epiphany of, it wasn't that it wasn't for me, it was that I was scared.
Yeah.
And I was like, you can't not do something out of fear. You have to, even if I do it and I decide, hey, I really don't like this, that's valid. But what's not valid is never even trying because I'm afraid.
Right.
So my short that I will be directing this summer, which is crazy to say, I'm directing a short called Dark Water, and it's very much in the same vein of Scales. It's sort of a follow-up, but it deals with depression and anxiety. So it's taking horror elements to manifest the feeling of a panic attack that slowly consumes the character to the point that she can't move forward because of the panic attack. And it ends a lot more sadly than Scales, but and that was very much inspired by the story of, it was this heartbreaking story of this woman out in, I want to say, like Oregon or Washington, but somewhere in one of the northwestern states, and she had been raped and went to the police and they didn't believe her, and none of her friends believed her, and the depression and loss of self-worth and self-loathing that she went through was so bad that she killed herself. And she made this Facebook post that was basically like, I can't live with myself anymore because I hate myself and I don't know how to deal with the fact that no one believed me. And then she killed herself. And so that was part of the inspiration, and also the sense of, if you've ever had anyone out there who's had a panic attack, like the sensation of drowning is one that a lot of people report. Like, I feel like I'm drowning, I can't breathe, I can't move, I'm stuck in place. So I wanted to take that, and then I was inspired by the story of this woman that was dealing with this PTSD and this anxiety and depression that she could not get over because it was hard for people to see where she was. So that is going to be my next project, and then I have 2 features that I have in pre-production. We're just waiting on funding. So one is a reverse ghost story told from the perspective of the ghost. And then the other one is a thriller. So staying in the horror genre with female leads on all of these projects. So
all right, excellent. Well, congratulations again on the award for Scales. Much deserved. And I really look forward to seeing what you have coming up next.
Thank you. Yes, the short will be called Dark Water. So that's going to be the first one coming out. We're going to shoot it this June.
All right, excellent.
I'd like to thank MR, Syd, and Nonie, as well as K11, who you didn't hear on here, but like I said, that interview will be running in their own league I want to thank them for their time at the festival. I want to thank Vanessa for putting on a wonderful festival. I'm really looking forward to coming here year after year. It's really a wonderful experience. And if you're a fan of genre in the Marietta area, the Atlanta area, I can't recommend it enough. It is really lovely. Rather than focus on everything I loved at the festival, which I did really love quite a bit of stuff, I want to focus on the ones that kind of stood out to me the most in the short film blocks. And I've already talked about the features, so I don't feel like I really need to go into them too much more. So I will say my favorite short films were Complimenting Cowboys, Cannibal Cat, La Chrysalide, I hope I pronounced that right, Povotron 500, Ghost in the Machine, Trauma Zero, Mushi, Grummy, Scales, Skin and Bones, This May Pose a Continuing Threat, Itch, Hexatic Phase, Cottonmouth, Ouzo and Black Currant, The Pay, Bliss is Orange, Don't Text Back, Unholy Moly, Meat Friend, I'm a Vampire, and that's a pretty good collection of short films for you to check out as the film festival season goes along. Try to find them online somewhere. It's a really wonderful and eclectic bunch, and I hope you check those out. That's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Podcast. I actually have quite a bit coming up in March and April. We're going to be talking about the Oscars, but we're also going to have a guest on that one. I'm looking forward to that. And we also are going to be talking about one of the great movies of all time as it turns 50. And we're also going to be introducing somebody new to the podcast to talk about America's pastime, as well as some more established classics with Tim Cox. That's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy.